You've likely heard the success story of quinoa, the Incan crop that in one decade went from traditional grain to global superfood. However, the quinoa you find in grocery stores only represents the tip of the iceberg. For generations, farmers in the Americas cultivated over 3,000 quinoa varieties that have unique tastes, nutritional profiles, and climate adaptation potential. Unfortunately, much of this biodiversity is now disappearing as farmers only grow a small handful of crops for the global market. For traditional crops to survive in the future, we need conservation to benefit farming communities. Researchers have developed a new approach that offers indigenous farmers tangible benefits for growing and conserving biodiversity. We call this Payments for Agrobiodiversity Conservation Services, or PACS.
We're very excited to have pioneered the implementation of PACS. Farmers at our project sites are being rewarded for growing threatened crop species and varieties with high public good value.
First, communities are offered landscape-wide competitive tenders. Farmer groups define conditions, including which priority species and varieties to cultivate from a crop portfolio, the kind and level of reward they need, and which farmers participate. Efficiency and social equity criteria inform the selection of communities with the most attractive bids. After signing a contract, these communities receive seeds of the agreed-upon crops to cultivate. Monitoring visits occur at key moments during the agricultural calendar. During visits, Extension Services can provide technical assistance and training. Finally, upon a successful harvest, a rewards ceremony is held. The entire community receives in-kind rewards such as agricultural inputs, building and school materials. The ceremonies can be high visibility events with government ministers and heads of national and local institutions participating. This supports the mainstreaming of agrobiodiversity into national and regional conservation policies and strategies. 8 years on, we've assessed the PACS approach and found it to be highly efficient and equitable. Rewards such as building materials and agricultural inputs have benefited the communities as well as the rescued seeds. Participating farmers have expressed satisfaction with the performance of threatened varieties, with many saying that as long as they had access to seeds, they would continue to cultivate them, even without further rewards. The approach has many applications, with connections to genebanks and even the private sector. One Peruvian startup company collaborated with PACS farmers to produce premium quinoa milk using a rare type of quinoa, which is now no longer at risk. Government support of PACS has provided a critical boost. The Peruvian Ministry of the Environment has expanded small-scale approaches to grow diverse potatoes, quinoa, and maize in 130 communities, working with local leaders, municipal governments, civil society, extension agents, and universities. Progress is being made to formalize PACS in government policy. To sum up, PACS have high potential for socially inclusive, low-cost agrobiodiversity conservation. Entire communities and local governments can join in these schemes to revive and conserve diverse traditional crops. However, they require widespread support to flourish at their full potential.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Yanni Van Beem, and on behalf of the GeneBank platform and the Crop Trust staff, thank you for joining us for today's Grow webinar. I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker today. Doctora Marleni Ramirez is a biologist and physical anthropologist. Her professional experience of the last 30 years is broad and includes work in her native Peru, in Ecuador and Bolivia, Mesoamerican countries, and several others. Marleni has had a sustained interest in on-farm conservation, including projects related to the use and management of native tubers by peasants in the Peruvian Andes, the conservation of native crops in northern Ecuador with an innovative component of agro-tourism, and work in various sectors of international development, including the Strategic Action Plan for Plant Genetic Resource Conservation and Use for Mesoamerica. This was a science-based and participatory project supported by the international treaty. She's currently the country representative of the Alliance of Biodiversity and CIAT in Lima, Peru, and is actively involved in cacao projects and the application of the Agrobiodiversity Index to community scale. This month's Grow title is Genebanks, What is Their Use to Farmers? A dialogue with the ex-situ community. Welcome, Marleni, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Jenny, and it is a pleasure to be with you all. And let me start by sharing my screen. Right, the broad question is, are gene banks serving farmers? And actually what I will talk about today is how to, share some of the examples that I know of where there is a very big role for gene banks. And first, I will start by sharing the actual scenario. Let me see. That we are facing right now. As most of you or everyone knows, there are ongoing food systems dialogues all over the world, and they are being framed in the post-COVID recovery also, and also by the rural transformation processes that are being envisioned by a number of people in government and related agencies. What we have seen is that, and I'm going to speak in terms of the Latin American region, which is what I know the most, and I don't know if it was mentioned, but I'm currently living in Peru for the last 5 years. So I have been able to observe all sorts of trends happening here. What has happened with COVID is very relevant to everything that we do, because there are a couple of very important things. The COVID has had serious impacts on both socially and economic. One recent figure indicates that over 30% of the population is now food insecure. That's a big number and a worrisome number. So what is being planned for this recovery is what is called a productive transformation, more food, better quality and taste also. This is important. This comes from one of the vice ministers in Peru. How is this going to be done with technological innovations? There is talk also of incentives, better logistical arrangements, and whatever productive transformations we are to engage in should be environmentally sustainable. And there is a very strong call for integrated efforts. What is very, very important is that the expectation is that all of these processes will result in better livelihoods for small scale farmers in terms of the agricultural sector. One of the other problems that I mentioned, the social dimensions of the pandemic in Latin America. I don't know if you've seen the news, but there are some social issues that have come up after the pandemic because people have not been able to go to work. And there are limitations for even selling those that are farmers, their products and so on. And we have seen very worrying social demonstrations in Colombia, and now in Peru, the big divide that has been shown very clearly in the elections, which are still not decided, although there are figures already there, but they are under discussion. So what we also expected with this transformation process is that we will result in better health and nutrition for all. In both cities and globally. How is this going to happen? It calls for a multi-sectorial dialogue and new governance structures, of course, because right now, most of the governments work like, most of the sectors in the government, agriculture, environment, production, health, work as silos. So this is something that we are hearing from the different heads of ministries at many different levels. Now, something else, this results in a number of what I call buzzwords for us to remember and think about our own role. How is that we can participate in this process? The fact that we are facing this situation is also an opportunity. So the agriculture is for the first time in Peru and some other countries in the Andes is being refocused to be based in family agriculture. It's a recovery that is, purpose is to be inclusive of farmers, women, youth, requires a redesign of the food system and demands sustainable responses that will permit that we develop a system that is more resilient. And all of this is recognized as very ambitious, but it's not impossible. Now, at the same time, in the community where we work, we see this slide comes from a presentation by Nigel Maxted at the latest Farmers' Pride meeting. I'm sorry, this is a picture that I took from my computer, but I was very taken by the synthesis of what is happening currently. In the meeting, there was a call to double the genetic diversity available to users. So this is very important. Apparently, the breeders are calling access to greater diversity because of the need to address climate change. And then it went on to point out what is happening with crop wild relatives that are suffering extinction, and and suppliers, users, 99% of, also pointing out that most of the crop wild relatives conservation is ex situ at seeding gene banks and supply users. And also pointed out very clearly that the similar data that we have for crop wild relatives is not available for land races. And this is very concerning. Well, anyway, this is, to me, was a very important statement. Now, let me go back to the examples that I'm going to present to you. This is what was shown in the initial video. I don't know if some of you were able to watch it in total. This is Resca, sorry, the slide is in Spanish, but PAX is the name of the initiative that I have been involved in for the past 10 years. Is called Payment for Agrobiodiversity Conservation Services, basically to provide incentives to farmers who are interested in growing some of the diversity that they have lost under their own terms, and with a great social recognition, which it is a very important element we have realized. This is an overview up to 2020. This year, there are many more because of what it says, indicates in the video. There's been
a big interest by the government of Peru, particularly by the Ministry of the Environment, that has uh, uh, quite a big number of communities involved in these PAC schemes. This is just a picture that shows some of the different elements. At the bottom side, we see on the left bottom, we see the diversity in this case of quinoa that are being rescued from disappearing. We use the 4-cell analysis method and others to determine precisely what is that the communities would like to recover, what they have lost, or what is occurring in very few households. And they show that, or they show their interest by proposing, presenting a proposal about what is that they would like to get in return for getting access to these seeds. Now, the seeds are not, because they are varieties that are being lost, they are not easy to find. It is quite an effort to look for them around in communities in different places, and to find also enough seed to distribute to farmers. One of the extreme cases is in the top right, where we were doing a PACS effort in Cusco, and looking for amaranth. It turns out that the colored amaranth has disappeared. We went around looking for the colored amaranth. We could not find it anywhere, and there was only white. The amaranth that is being grown is white from a couple, 2 or 3 improved varieties. So we went back to this gene bank collection at the University of Cusco. And here is the curator, and you see the different plastic containers where he keeps part of the collection. But in his hands, you see a cutout bottle of soft drink that is used also to store the seeds. Fortunately, we were able to get the seeds that we require to do that campaign in Kiwicha. This was done by only during one season and has continued. Well, anyway, we are also doing some monitoring of all those efforts to see for how long farmers keep growing the seeds, although some of them, and we have done this for quinoa, continue to grow them, but after we are documenting this, after 5 years, that number really goes far down. So this is going to help us to collect information about when to do repeat interventions to make sure that the recovery seeds are kept at a level that they should. But this level at which it should is also a question mark. This is a diagram of the Research for Development platform of PACS. Is quite complex. It has quite a number of different elements, but you see under prioritization, which is on the left-hand side, there is a sign where we have on occasion, and when the data is available, utilize the ex situ data to really find out which are the which of the accessions, in this case at the gene bank, are most in need of being entered into this program. And what else? Portfolio and triage. This is and there is also here, it's not included, but it's as a source of germplasm. The local gene banks have been important, but they themselves are struggling terribly. It's just amazing how they are able to sort of refresh their collections every year, or part of their collections. Okay, so this is the platform that I wanted to show to you, and then there are a number of pending issues in terms of PACS. PACS has been very successful in terms of the appeal to farmers, in terms of the appeal to government officers at very different levels. It is a very attractive notion, and as I shown in the first slide, is something that in Latin America we have tried in several countries, Guatemala, as we said, Ecuador, and Peru, and Bolivia. And it seems that in Peru it has taken off. And it is very important to note that it is because from the very start, the ministry and local officials were very involved. In the other countries, we have worked with NGOs or second-degree community organizations, and it has not been taken up as it has been in Peru, although the situations faced in the countries are also slightly different. Then what is left for us to do? And in the issue of prioritization, we need to find enough rare seeds for multiplication and distribution to bedding farmers. We also need to support farmer managers of diversity in establishing links with other key actors. Genebanks establish initiatives with other similar undertakings. And it is very important that we explore networking. I have been, because I was able to attend some of the presentation and the Farmers' Pride, I was really blown away to see all the effort that is happening, all the examples in Europe. And I think that overall, we need to continue to draw attention to the role of small-scale farmers in conservation, generation, and value adding to crop genetic diversity. This is something that I think, but I think, because there is quite a number of people that are involved in this, agree, and it comes from a recent paper by Michael Halewood. Now, the second example that I want to show you is an action plan that we developed with the support from the International Treaty to strengthen the conservation and use of plant genetic resources in Mesoamerica, considering the topic of climate change as a background. Now, this plan is still valid. There are still a few more years to go because it was a 10-year plan. And here I'm just revising what is the SAPM. Well, it's a roadmap. Some of you are familiar with it, I think. And it's focused on 10 Mesoamerican crops, which are important for local and global food security. And it was developed through a systematic analysis of information and I think very importantly, a broad consultation with regional stakeholders that included, of course, farmers, but also many of the other stakeholders, from national governments to NGOs to the academics and so on. And well, this is some of the justification of why we did this and did the analysis in terms of what is going to happen to the genetic resources of the region in terms of climate change and some of the models that we use. This is because Mesoamerica is highly vulnerable to climate change. And also we were interested in doing this because we saw that all countries in this region, the six countries that were involved, are part of the international treaty. So they are primed to really exchange materials should they wish so. And well, anyway, that was the expectation. We focused on 10 gene pools, as you see, the list of maize, beans, cassava, and so on, some persea, some avocado, and some fodder also. And using some criteria. We did the usual, the climate projections this is for crop boil relatives up to 2050, then determine the priority areas for in situ conservation of crop species, all of this using secondary data from genebanks, most of them from the genebanks. This is an overlap of both crop and crop boil relative diversity, and also presence of linguistic groups to prioritize areas for conservation. In the process, we talked to farmers in the 5 countries, asking them what were their main concerns regarding climate change. And basically what they said is the need to have access to adapted seeds. They would very much like to have information about the weather to schedule planting and cultural activities. And they saw that the community seed banks could play a very important role in doing this. Something that I should mention is that in Central America, there have been and are still quite a number of community seed banks serving farmers. And they also would like to see a local seed production and also access to extension. That's always is not different from what you find actually in general terms in other countries. This was, as I mentioned, a highly participatory process. So the strength of the findings and plans are supported by a wide consultation in 3 countries of the region. Unfortunately, we did not have plans to raise the funds to be able to implement the project. So or the findings and recommendations of the action plan. There were about 84. One of the interesting facts that emerged is this after the implementation. So for implementation, I should say. So the participants saw themselves implementing this action plan in what are in biocultural territories connected to gene banks, and they also imagine how we could here on the right-hand side of the screen, how we could increase the distribution of this adapted material. And then this new architecture of ex situ conservation emerged also from the consultations. And here it is, and you see that the community seed banks, the green, were very important in terms of this region, and they were all interconnected. This was really exciting to see, and it is a wish that still remains to be realized.
Marleni, if we could
Yes.
go back to the previous slide, there are actually 2 comments that would tie in very nicely with your previous diagram.
Okay.
Is it okay if I ask the questions at this point?
Sure.
We have 2 comments from the crowd. The first one is from Tariku from Ethiopian Bioversity Institute. And the question is, in what ways can we collaborate to design a robust biodiversity conservation strategy? Trade-off between biodiversity conservation and sustainable agrobiodiversity. So a general question which this slide might be able to give an answer, or maybe you can say, how can we collaborate to design a more robust biodiverse conservation strategy?
I think it's very important to take into account the local efforts, and this is focused on on-farm conservation. All these initiatives, for example, taking the community seed banks, would very much need to know and learn about seed conservation methods. That is something that the community that I think that is mostly the ex situ community that I'm talking with now knows about. You know about that, how to manage banks, how to document the diversity that you have. And so basically at that level, I think it is, there are a number of skills and knowledge that are within the ex situ community that need to be somehow communicated to the community genebanks. And all of this is going to happen through collaborations. And because of what I shown in the first two slides, I think that the moment is right to do that. There is a demand, there is a concern at the global level that we need to do something. And so, and there are a number of suggestions on how to do that. And there are some experiences, some of them that are coming, interestingly enough, from Europe. And I think it's just fantastic. It's a great opportunity for us to do plenty.
Yeah. There is another question which we might take on a little bit later than when you have time. Yep.
Yeah, well, this is what is this process resulted in sustainable biocultural territories integrated in existing conservation systems. Again, linking existing protected area systems as part of biocultural territories with farmers growing crops. Establishment of community seed banks, crop diversification for risk management. That is very important. The collections that are in genebanks at the moment somehow can respond to that. Now, of course, there is a lot of participatory plant breeding in Mesoamerica. So this was something that came through and then was picked up by a regional project, actually, that took up this finding, or this to be able to meet this need. And well, some capacities for meteorological data and the promotion of farmers' rights and legal frameworks within the international treaty implementation. We work with all focal points of the international treaty in all countries. So this was very useful. And the call for the creation of incentives, in which in part the PACS is a response to and had been initiated in the previous years. Now, this is 7 years forward, and Jamora from the Crop Trust made a presentation during the Farmers' Pride meeting. Again, these are shots from the screen. I found them very interesting, and just a lot of convergence and synthesis on what's happening from what we see at the ground level, if you want. Of course, revision of what's in situ and ex situ. And what is the most interesting to me is that the call that we need to get better at working hand in hand and help stakeholders from all sides to understand that they are not substitutes, that all this conservation is part of a continuum, and that we all will win if we work hand in hand. But we have to think creatively with that. Now, she also pointed out, and I like this because it's not just myself that is saying this, that this is what we know already, that there is a funding gap for in situ conservation, only partially conserved ex situ. And there is a high risk of extinction and loss of traditional knowledge because of all the factors that are really, to me, are terrifying, and it's something that I see a lot here in Peru. And it is of great concern. And in other countries, Andean countries, that I have observed quite a bit. There is a big generational gap. Those farmers that are involved in conservation and are interested in becoming conservationists, if you want, are mostly old, and their children, of course, they send them all to school. There is a big generation gap that we need to work on, providing options that are attractive to these youngsters. Most of the farmers, and in the case of Peru and Ecuador, there is a high premium put on higher education. Everybody goes through universities, they make sacrifices, but then what are the options for employment. So anyway, this is something that to keep in mind, that is a very serious situation. And we think that these programs of incentives, of recognition, of social recognition of what farmers do are going to be very important in increasing precisely the conditions to have people in farms. Then Jamora also went through some examples of rematriation, I love that word, and repatriation of maize, and the example that most of us know about the potato park in Peru. And what is interesting to me is to see the numbers for what we have observed also, that what are the most important benefits that farmers recognize is the recovery of lost land races. And this here again is something that the genebanks, who have well-documented collections, can be involved in as providers of this diversity, but also as helping with the multiplication, because the genebanks are not prepared per se in having the amount of seed that farmers need, but they can work with others so that the multiplication is done appropriately, and then that you keep track of what happens once these seeds are reintroduced. And the social benefits are here very clear: general family community benefits, the bridge between traditional and scientific knowledge is very much valued, and benefits for women. Those are the ones that keep the reputation. This is big. So it's a very important process, but it's not just about, although it is very important to feel good, but it is important to feel good. There are some tangible benefits that we through PACS are still trying to document it. And also something that is very interesting, the evaluation of African rice genetic resources. What I found again is the contrast in the evaluation for the varieties and land races, that there's some greater appreciation for the land races overall. And then I present, this is the SADC project. Just really, to me, is a great example of what is possible to do. Again, I have not looked at this in detail. I knew about the work of Asian and a number of other scientists, but not to this extent. So there is much to learn from this, and I think that is a question of putting our heads together. What can be built on this, and what can be utilized as a true lesson learned, and move it to other continents. And again, I'm thinking in Latin America. This is just an example of how far that thinking has gone, the in situ networks of crop wild relative populations, and the governance, which is a very important topic to put any of this in action, and working with local communities, see how these schemes can really respond to the needs and expectations of the stakeholders for a given period of time. Myself and Adam Drucker from Bioversity are involved in Jeff Agrobiodiversity. Jeff sponsored a project with the Ministry of the Environment here in Peru. And something interesting that has happened in Peru is that recently they have created these agrobiodiversity zones in different parts of Peru. Communities get together and prepare a dossier of documentation asking for this. It's an official category. It's a category under the protected area system, and there's a lot to be done there in terms of how the communities are going to manage, how is this going to be interconnected with the rest of protected spaces, and so on. So, and we are involved in some of that, and it's a very exciting development also happening in Peru. And again, I think that there is much to be learned from other examples and other networks. And this is something that we have to do very fast. I also found a number of collaborations that maybe this will provide some responses to the first person that asked questions. So again, what is important is to ensure that communities have seed at hand that is locally adapted through targeted multiplication. We mentioned that there are some technical needs there. And again, this is the need for documentation and development of databases and its maintenance. There is plenty in the ex situ community that we can learn from to make this a reality. It doesn't have to be reinvented. That's what I'm saying. The best practices, there is a lot there. And then the identification of lost varieties of high value and conserve most threatened or endangered species and varieties. There are a combination of methods that can be used for that. As I mentioned earlier, when you have good data and even characterization data, you can use that from genebanks. As we know, in many of the national genebanks, that's somewhat limited. I'm not sure if I reintroduced also the reintroduction of lost varieties of high value. Again, Community National Gene Bank here is suggested that National Gene Bank can provide lost varieties and the community seed banks can multiply and store them. Where there are community seed banks, this is possible, but as I pointed out, the knowledge is not necessarily there. And yes, well, it's a call to carry out new research and new technologies for the storage, conservation and multiplications. Train farmers on conservation methods, build capacity for the production of quality seed for the benefit of the farming communities, and promote community seed banks as a platform for community development, as we have seen in a number of countries, and document and share information about the emerging dynamic changes. Well, and then there are other suggestions, organize more seed diversity fairs, and all of this was adapted from some of the observations from Nigel Maxted recently. So we go back to the situation that we are facing. Frankly, I think that there is a great opportunity of working between the ex situ and farming communities in different parts of the world to really respond to this realization that we need to work on these processes. So we should I see this as a big opportunity. There is an upswelling of interest, a convergence of interest from different continents, mentioning the farmer's pride, mentioning what is happening in the Americas. In the case of the Americas, we are particularly concerned because, as you know, we have two of the Vavilov centers of diversity, and there are lots of traditional farmers still, but they are in a situation of not having access or connections to these others that can really be their partners in the working with the diversity that they are maintaining. There are lots of things that have been written about that, and I'm really, the justification is there for us to do something together. And I think this is it. Well, as I said, the time is right.
A very good ending. We have actually a lot of comments and questions. So if you don't mind, we'll go through these one by one as they have showed up. From Dr. Siddiqui in Islamabad, he says, in view of the COVID situation that you have right now, what role do you foresee of the community seed bank in family agriculture?
Well, I think it's it continues to be important. The activities in the fields are going ahead, and I think that I don't know what's happening elsewhere. Siddiqui, I guess that's in Asia or North Africa. Yeah, Pakistan. Yes, in Pakistan, but in Peru and Ecuador, Bolivia, as far as I know, the activities are continuing, although there are lots of limitations. But I think that the community seed banks are really important as a social platform that really allow to diversify and take on other functions, such as this one that has to do not just as repositories of seeds for one season or two. I think that there is plenty more that can be known based on all the examples that we know from different parts of the world. I really think that their role in, how can I say, in empowering the local farmers is much greater than just a place to store things. And this is something that needs to be worked on and just put it there forefront.
Yeah, excellent point. There's another very, very interesting question about encouraging farmers, especially big farmers that take part in the movement and conservation of plant genetic resources. When most of them, how would you encourage them to come into this fold of conservation when in fact they're sourcing out and buying their food from big production companies? So how do you persuade the bigger farmers to buy into what the smaller farmers are doing?
Yeah, that's it's not easy, but I think the pressure has to come from the peers, and you have to appeal to their own self-interest also. I think that the environment that we're living in is giving a lot more value to food that is organic, that if you know who is growing it, there are many people, not just in the developed world, but in developing countries that are valuing that. That's why, and there is a pride in being able to do that. And so you have to find those farmers. I give you an example, which is something that has boggled my mind. In Peru and Bolivia are the centers of diversity for capsicum. Not very many people know about that. Most of us think that is Mexico. That's really not the case. And what happens in Peru? You go, there's a big growers of capsicum, but they are growing the varieties from Mexico, jalapenos and something. So it is, and then you have to do a lot of education and appeal to a number of their own interests. And I think that's, you have to find the space, but I really believe that it's very important that at the higher levels of society, this is common talk. What are the aspirations? What do we really want to consume? Do we want that what we eat really is really what you are, and what you support is really what you are? You have to appeal to all those important interests. I think that more and more you cannot be indifferent to what's happening. So I would say let's think about those campaigns. It's not to make everyone cry, but it is everyone, on the contrary, to make them proud of what they are. And everybody likes that, I think.
A sense of ownership of their own.
Exactly. Like the empowerment is a sense of ownership. Is the same. I stand for this, and I'm proud of it, and so on. And I'm a good person. Something like that. Yeah.
Related to that, we have a question about small farmers. Do you know specifically of successful incentives that you can share that have worked with small farmers in them conserving their genetic resources? What very successful incentives do you know about for small farmers that have worked in your mind?
Yes, I think that the one that we know the most is this of packs that I mentioned, where farmers have continued to grow the varieties that they themselves selected. they did their for sale analysis, and then they said there are these varieties that are disappearing that I haven't seen them in a long time, and I would like to bid for this one. I'm going to dedicate this space of land, 50 square meters even, to grow this variety. And because I like it, but also because there are opportunities in the market, and I will keep it. And I would like to have more other varieties that as you know, farmers really are very curious about other materials, not just their own. They really want to experiment. And some of the comments under the PACS initiative is that farmers say, we don't need incentives even, we need seeds. If you provide us more of the seeds, we will be willing to continue growing. Yes, absolutely. But we have also found out that for us, as looking at the conservation at the landscape level, there is a number that there will need for some re-incentives or something to remotivate or motivate again farmers to continue growing, because eventually that goes down. If you do an intervention and go back 5 years later, you have a good percentage of the farmers that have kept those varieties without further incentives. But then after that, it goes down very quickly. So anyway, those are successful. And also in other cases, we have been able to interest some entrepreneurs that have tried some of these varieties, and because of all the multiple messages that go with them, being able to place them in the market and make orders. And this is an example that we show in the video of quinoa milk. And it's a small enterprise of a Peruvian American entrepreneur, a young one interested in exploring, and that found something that is doing very, very well. And in that sense, for those interested in conservation, we have solved the issue of conservation, because the population now of that variety is quite large. So it went from being in danger, at risk, to not.
Now we have a milk in the supermarket that's made from it. I can't wait to try it, by the way.
Oh, really? Yeah, no, it's so
yeah, no, I have tried every single thing, coconut, walnut, almond, so now they're coming out with, for example, like quinoa milk. So that should be very interesting to try. A very good incentive. Related to that question, we have a question from Norma Manrique from SIP. Are the PAC initiatives with government support? Are they supported by the government? Or where does the funding come for these PACs?
Well, initially for the first few years, we used grant monies for the rewards, because what needs money are the rewards and meetings with the farmers to determine the varieties that are at risk and so on. And the governments have been able to provide some funds, definitely. And now in the case of Peru, as I indicated, is where this idea has taken the most. The government is trying to create a national program so that that will support to get the allocation from the Ministry of Finance, so that this is a national program. And for that, we need to provide some estimates of cost. We have some back of the envelope costs now, but we have accumulated information to make that possible. And another avenue that has been explored also by the same ministry is to see if agrobiodiversity can be considered or recognized as ecosystem service. That's still under in the works, and we got that to be included in one of the documents that are generated in this process by the Ministry of the Environment. So those two avenues are being sought to make this something that will, because the government, although they do have money, they cannot pay for these incentives to farmers. The law does not allow that at the moment. So we'll see what happens if that law can be changed, or if we can explore these two other avenues. So one of the tasks that we have towards the end of this year is to present a coherent plan to the Ministry of Finance or Treasury of Peru That's a commitment to see if they, no, yeah. So
Wonderful.
there is a lot of,
Okay.
and also there is a lot of interest in the local governments. We have accompanied some of the local governments where we had interventions with developing projects with public monies to do these interventions, PACs. They are public investment projects are called.
Mhm.
So that too. So it's, yeah. And now we are looking at crowd funding, by the way. We're going to start looking at crowd funding. So
That
you
might work. We'll see.
It might,
Sometimes
yeah.
it works, sometimes it doesn't. We have a
Exactly.
very interesting question here. We have about 4 to 5 more minutes. So because we would like to have everybody, give everybody a chance to ask their questions. They're long answers, but maybe we can reduce them and give everybody a chance to have an answer. This is really interesting. Do you identify any inequality within the willingness to accept prizes to conserve seed? In other words, is the prize fair? The prizes that are given to people, the funds that are given to people, do you consider those to be fair? And are there inequalities in the way that they're distributed?
I think that farmers are, when they make their bids, they are usually helped by people around them and to make, to be competitive. So, and there is a curve. So there are, and of course they are asking for things in kind, it's never cash.
Right.
But of course you have to buy them, whatever they, even if they are mattresses or other school supplies. And I don't know if it's fair or unfair, but we can see big differences in what farmers ask. And I think, and that seems to have to do with how much interest they have in actually getting the seeds, and how is that they think that they are being competitive. And this is something that the farmers themselves are learning in the process. We are not witness to those conversations.
Transactions, yeah.
Yes, amongst themselves in terms of deciding why this group, because there are several groups, and we often don't select all of them, unfortunately, for lack of funds. And also the offers are distributed along a curve. From more to less, we knew, for example, for quinoa, when we had the first interventions in Bolivia, that the Bolivians were asking for a lot more a lot more for their effort to grow X variety, as opposed to the Peruvians on the other side of the Altiplano.
Yeah. I have a question of my own, actually. The question that we had for this Go webinar was, are the gene banks serving the farmers? So if you had to name one thing that gene banks have not been doing too well, what would you ask us or ask gene banks to do to serve you? What would you like us to give you? What would be the number one thing that you would want right now to gene banks to give you? What would that be?
I think it would be very good to give some form of technical assistance and a recognition of what they have. And maybe also the other one, so because this goes, all of this is wrapped up in this recognition also, because most of the farmers, nobody pays attention to them actually. And so, and also to see them as perhaps sources of new materials. That would be wrapped up in that. And I will say that there are
technical assistance, recognition, and new materials.
Exactly.
Okay, that's perfect. This is another very interesting question from Mr. or Mrs. Bansal. What is the mode of protecting the farmers' rights?
Farmers' rights is to for example, to have access to new materials is one. Access to materials that are being lost. That is absolutely one of the elements as far as I understand it. And this is what PACS is offering to them. And also something we mentioned that it is, it seeks social justice. I think we have used some of those words in some of our writings. And indeed, that's the case, because in the selection of bids, they are not only based on how much they cost, but actually who is making the bids. I think that we are, as I mentioned, very conscious that farmers are getting old, and we, in the composition of the bids, we see if there are younger farmers, younger families, and if there are women, and if there are, sorry, widows or so, and we try to consider those as favorable points also. And because there is a lot of knowledge in the generation of the older generation, but in the younger one, obviously we want to support that they get involved in these efforts.
Okay. There are two actually related comments, and this will be the last one, from Norma Manrique about the restoration process that has been in place in CIP for decades, where they restore things that have been collected in the 1970s back into Parque de la Papa and other communities in Peru. And she hopes that there is momentum to let them continue the funding. But related to that is Sophia's comment, and she says, what farmers and community characteristics play a role in actually having successful conservation initiatives? In other words, it's not just about the one side pushing for the conservation and the acknowledgement. It's also the characteristics within the farming community that makes them engage and actually be successful. So what community characteristics are playing a role in this successful agrobiodiverse conservation movement?
Yeah, I think that they have to be somehow organized around even a group, and there have to be some champions even within themselves. That's really important, and members that are committed and that would pull the rest to comply. And we have observed some of this also, that there were some cases. You said, I'm going to grow X number of square meters or such and such. And there is one or two farmers that are not, have not really taken care of their fields, but the others come up and try to meet that collective commitment that they have made. So peer organization, respect for the others, some leadership that is distributed, not just one leader is what I would say. From what we have seen, it's not just one person, but rather a collective. And this is, of course, very important in the Andes and in places such as Guatemala, the highlands, where we have also worked and observed this. So I would say those are, yes, absolutely. And not every community or every group will be successful. That's yeah. No.
That's a given, yeah.
Yeah, it
well,
is.
With that, we would like to thank you very much, Marleni, for a very interesting presentation. We love the answers. We also love the questions. That's what we're here about. Thanks for taking the time to be with us. To all of you, the people in Crop Trust, Faye and Linus, thank you for supporting us. Luigi for monitoring everything. We're glad to have you and hope to have you again next month. We have Dr. Amber Schultz talking about digital sequence information. And the question is, a looming disaster or a hidden opportunity for positive change? So we hope to see you next month in August. And until then, please stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.